everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. We are super excited to be interviewing Bridget Busacker today. She is the founder of Managing Your Fertility. What I think is so interesting about Bridget, and we're going to get to know her more, is that she created this Managing Your Fertility organization out of frustration. So as her and her husband were preparing for marriage, it was very difficult for her to find NFP resources. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop website of all the NFP methods. And again, we hope to learn more, and I know we will as we interview you, Bridget. But we're so excited. She does some freelance writing on various outlets, and she's just very passionate and excited about women's healthcare. So without further ado, Bridget, please share more with our listeners, just a little bit about you to get us started.
I'm really happy to be here with you both. Thank you for having me on. So I am Bridget Busacker, founder of Managing Your Fertility. I founded it in July of 2018. And I actually just a couple of months ago, as of February 2021, I say full brain part-time because I'm also a stay-at-home mom, invested my time in managing your fertility more so that I could really see more of an impact in women's health and be able to take my work to the next level. My background is in health communications. So I have a master's in health communications through the University of Minnesota, and then have degrees with the Catechetical Institute here in the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. So just really fusing my love of theology of the body along with the fertility awareness sciences, but not specifically only reaching out to Catholic Christian women, really trying to work with and navigate the space in a judgment-free way with all women. And managing your fertility, like you said, really did come out of a frustration in the process of marriage prep and learning about natural family planning and finding that there really wasn't one space that seemed to have every possible method available. And so that challenge for my then fiance and husband and I was thinking, okay, are we really picking the best one? And I think a little bit that millennial-esque mindset came out. We want the very best, and realizing now, we've used, I think at this point, 3 different methods, and really just had to embrace that, in different seasons of life, using a different method is totally okay with what makes sense for my body and our marriage. But I think in that space, it really pushed me to see what was really going on. What were the conversations in women's health? What was missing? What did I want to see more of? And finding that there was a gap that I think was really where the Holy Spirit was calling me to step into, and working with different women in the space to figure out, where's that gap and could I fill it? I decided to apply for the Given Institute. And through that process and being in DC and working really intensively on this project, and then having the next couple of years to really flesh out what it would look like, it's where I came to the idea of an online one-stop shop of fertility awareness resources for women and couples. So I now focus on, providing a blog where I'm sharing women's stories, continuing to edit and update the website with current information, more research, linking to resources. So I'm not reinventing the wheel, but really trying to build out collaboration, launching a podcast, and just seeing where else I can serve women in this space and helping them learn more about their bodies and their health and embracing that in its totality. And on a personal note, I've been married for almost 5 years. I have a daughter, Felicity, who's a little over 1 and expecting another baby girl in June. So it's been a wild ride, but I really leaned into the babies and dreams that Leah Darrow really has proliferated online, and just seeing that this business and this work that I do has really taken off in the space and season of motherhood, which has been really powerful in my own journey, and just seeing that it's possible to do both. But there's that flexibility and that creativity that's required to do it.
Totally.
Awesome. Bridget, that's so great. I really, when you talk about the marriage prep part of it, my husband and I did a lot of marriage prep, and we would spend, all day with young couples, and NFP or fertility awareness-based methods. There was always that little part, and a lot of times you would have a witness couple come in. And I just feel like, it was so limited, the amount of information that was given in that kind of setting. And also, it was also directed towards just one method usually. So you would have one witness couple, they would explain how they used it. If you were a couple like me and my husband, most people didn't think it worked because we had so many kids, so I always felt like we were a bad example of, for the couples who didn't want a big family. But oh my gosh, I just love the idea of having a resource that, couples can go to, women can go to, where you can get all of this information, not just a little piece of the puzzle. And ever since I've learned about your managingyourfertility.com, I've been recommending it to my patients now. because I'm like, here's a place where you can go. And yes, I am familiar with the Creighton model system and I'm familiar with Marquette, but here's a place you can go and you can get all the information, because each and every woman is individual and has individual needs, like you said, and we're also in different stages of our life. So one method at one time may not work at another time. And to have a place where you can go to get all those resources in one stop, totally awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing it, that you're sharing it too, which is so awesome. Just in helping, I think for me, my intention was really to help women have this information so that they actually had options, because I think that was the biggest thing that I saw the disconnect in the conversation around feminism and birth control and family planning, was that we were really focused on no options. You know, it was really all about like, be on birth control. You could get pregnant at any time. You're so fertile. And then as I got into this work, it was that women weren't understanding how their bodies worked. Infertility and miscarriage were much more common and were not commonly talked about. So women felt, I think, very jaded in this space, where there was either frustration or tears, like, how did I not know about this sooner? How was I not taught this sooner? And so that's really fueled my passion to say, okay, how can I work with those college age women, those women in their 20s who may or may not be engaged, but I think that disconnect, especially in the Catholic Church, hearing natural family planning and thinking, well, I'm not married, I'm not engaged, so that's probably not for me. And I'm really working to expand that conversation, as many are, as you are, to say, okay, fertility awareness doesn't mean just married women or engaged women. It goes beyond that. It's really starting at younger ages and having, again, those options available so that you know what's possible, and to really give that space and that freedom to ask questions so that these women can come to the conclusion themselves that this is a decision that they want to make. And it's often what I see in the process of starting and learning about fertility awareness and being skeptical, to really starting to ask questions and thinking, actually, this could be for me. Maybe this isn't so hard and this is actually possible.
I really want to drive that point home in, the pre-marriage retreats and things in preparation for marriage. Just like you guys, my husband and I, we do that work too. And it's very interesting that after, like at the end of our conversation, I try to prep the message as much as I can, but it's surprising the number of women who don't hear us say, you don't have to even be using this to avoid pregnancy. It's a health monitoring tool. Like, oh, we're not ready for kids right now. And I'm like, did you listen? You don't have to be ready for kids to use NFP or to use fertility awareness. Like, the whole presentation was about how you can use it to avoid or to just understand your cycle, or just to, again, be empowered to know that all things are going well, and that when you're wanting to achieve that, maybe it'll be a little easier for you. So you're right. It is like women are very jaded if they, especially specifically women who maybe grow up within the Catholic Church, who've heard of NFP before, and they just assume it's a bunch of no's, but we all know that actually it's a bunch of yeses. There's so much more freedom in understanding our body and our fertility and its functions. And when we don't understand it, I feel like women are bound to what they don't know. And so I just applaud you, Bridget, for all the work that you're doing. I know many people, I know myself included, I'm wondering, two things. One, Bridget, what are maybe like list 5 or more of some of the methods that you have featured on your website, and maybe just give like a little intro to each of them. So that's my first one. Second one is, what methods have you used and why did you like them?
Okay, great questions. The first one, so with the categories, I like to start out with categories. So with natural family planning, fertility awareness-based methods, it's the same thing. And I really like to explain that natural family planning is really integrated with theology of the body and helping a couple live out a virtuous marriage and understanding how to love each other in that free, total, faithful, fruitful reality, and really conquering and battling lust in the process, and that desire of selfish desire versus selfless desire of each other. So with that umbrella in place, under that, there's mucus only, hormonal only, and symptothermal methods. So with mucus only, you're tracking, you're using a lot of the femtech. So Marquette is really commonly used. I really like Whole Mission, and Marquette and Whole Mission and Femme Fertility, not Femme Health method, but Femme Fertility, FEMME. They're really working to promote and teach Marquette methods. A lot of it has transitioned online because of COVID-19, which is really exciting because a lot more women are receiving the message, being able to take classes. And I'm not getting as many messages of, oh, I can't take this method because no one teaches it in my area. So that is one. Hormonal only, really focusing on the Creighton method. And I know Femme Health also falls under that as well. So you're really looking at, excuse me, did I say hormonal? Mucus only, mucus only. So you're looking at specifically and focusing only on the mucus. So you're really getting to know your mucus very intentionally. And then with symptothermal, you're using that biomarker of cervical mucus along with temp checks. So that's where Couple to Couple League has really, I don't want to say own that space, but they do a lot of work in that space along with SymptoPro. But I know of more methods that are coming out of that. I should say organizations. This is where people get kind of fuzzy because they're like, there are really three methods, right? We have mucus only, hormonal only, symptothermal methods, but then under that are different organizations teaching those methods, delivering the education in different ways so that individuals can do in person, they can do online, and then what that looks like for each method is going to look really differently because some require much more intensive check-ins where you're meeting, at least once a month, or you're going to be having sessions, within a 2-month time frame every week. And then after that, you'll have check-ins as you need it with a practitioner. So I think with those flexibilities and those offerings, it's really helpful because I think initially it can almost feel overwhelming. You're like, wow, that's too many options. That's what I get from women a lot of times. They're like, okay, now I feel overwhelmed. But it's like, all right, let's take a step back and see, like, based on the criteria of what you're looking at and what those biomarkers are there certain ones that maybe would fit your lifestyle better, would fit experiences you have with your cycle, if you have irregularities or concerns, or if you've potentially been charting with something like Kindara or Clue, and you really would like to transition under a particular method to work with a practitioner or an instructor. And that's something where for a lot of single women, I recommend Femme Health because it's a really nice segue. It has a really intuitive, nice app. So for women who are in the space of using Kindara or Clue, but have never worked with a practitioner, I often recommend having them transition to Femme Health because you have that data not only stored within the app, but then you also have that addition of an instructor to be able to work with. And then they can also connect you with doctors and things like that. Because I think the challenge with a lot of the apps out there, unless they're actually tied with a specific method that's been certified and researched, it's challenging to figure out, can you work with an instructor or not? What are you supposed to do next steps if you have questions? So you're not so much on your own. And I think, Clue and Kandara are great. That's what I used in college with a lot of girlfriends, which was really fun with the femtech first starting out. But it quickly became obvious to me I couldn't continue using those in the process of transitioning into my own use of methods. So what my husband and I started with was the Couple to Couple League, so symptothermal. We used it for about a year and a half. And then in the process of refining Managing Your Fertility's website, I was attending some sessions with Femme Health and really liked how much more intuitive the app was. The courses were online, which I really liked. Couple to Couple was in person. And the more I was learning about that option, I really liked more consistent check-ins. And it was a little bit more, I think for us, just there was the push for a check-in coming from the instructor as much as it was us. And I think we needed that to just reestablish and rebaseline and make sure like this is making sense for us. So we were still able to take the symptothermal approach and applying the temperature aspect to charting with Femme Health, which was great. So we weren't having to transition too much. But I mean, with all of these methods, the main biomarker is cervical mucus, so that doesn't really go away, So with that, I actually found underlying issues with my hormones, and I had too high level of testosterone, which then I was connected with my current doctor, and she's fantastic. And so she did a bunch of different blood work and testing. And that was another aspect of Femme that I really liked. Part of their protocol is doing a blood panel and being able to see through that blood work. They look at the hormones and just being able to figure out, okay, is there anything going on? Is there anything problematic? Because I was experiencing at weird times brown bleeding in my cycle, which I just wrote off because it didn't happen every cycle. And I was noticing it increasing a little bit, but I was like, oh, it's probably fine. My cycle's within a window. This looks really normal. Otherwise, everything I know, and that's where I was realizing, I think I need an instructor again because something's off here. And it was really great to have that additional support. So through that process, I was placed on dexamethasone, a super small supplement, to be able to get my testosterone leveled out again and just getting my cycle back in order. So we were able to get pregnant. We miscarried with our first and then successfully got pregnant with Felicity a couple months after that. And just that process of learning how my body worked, I really was so much more grateful for NFP, because I think for my husband and I in that process, I think we were thinking we were kind of like NFP champs. And not to say like you can't be great at NFP and great at charting, but I think there was a little bit of a disconnect for us in that first year and a half of marriage and charting where, yeah, it was working, but there was like this little moment like, well, there are little like irregularities I'm noticing. We didn't really take a super proactive approach with my instructors because we weren't intentionally wanting to get pregnant. We're like, if we got pregnant, it's great, but we're really not looking to start our family yet. And so I think that process of going through, me having to do more tests and ruling out if I had PCOS or endometriosis and just making sure there weren't any other issues, it was really a wake up call for me. Like, wow, this is so powerful to have this, because we were getting to that point of like, well, we would like to start a family. And so it was really aligning well with switching to this method and having my blood work done and seeing, okay, there are some minor inconsistencies that are impacting me optimally ovulating and potentially sustaining a pregnancy. And so with my first pregnancy, I was on progesterone for those first 14 weeks as well, because of the irregularities that were found initially. And then postpartum, we switched to a Marquette method, hormonal only method. And we went through Whole Mission, who offers Marquette training. And they were fantastic. We were able to do it all online. And thank goodness with COVID-19, we had that option. So we were able to meet regularly. And I will say that was a jump for us, just going from a symptothermal method and looking at mucus and taking my temp to switching over to FemTech and focusing a little more heavily on LH strips and peeing on a stick every morning. And it just was a jump for my brain, I think, being in that postpartum time. So really grateful for how intentional and intensive the meetings were with the instructors learning the method. We opted to learn it like a month before Felicity was born, and then continued to meet as, I was figuring out my cycle and I was, cleared for sex, and just going through all the different protocols to say like, okay, we really need to jump back into this and make sure we understand what we're doing. But all three were really great in our marriage and just really helped us, I think, to better understand my body and just understanding how my body works and how my husband's body works with mine. And it was really great to have options, because I don't think I personally would not want to be using couple to couple league right now postpartum. I also wouldn't want to be using Femme postpartum, but they were so perfect for where we were in our marriage and in that time of life, that when we transitioned to Marquette and learned about it, it was like, this makes more sense. And as my cycle was returning and I was breastfeeding and really relearning my body and getting to know my body again postpartum, it was really helpful to have really specific data points that I could look to and better understand, because my cervical mucus was either non-existent or all over the place in those early months postpartum.
Wow, Bridget, you're the perfect person to have started this website, because you've done it all.
I've hopped around a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, having experience with all those different methods, really helps, because, experience is everything. We can tell someone how something works. We can give them all the instructions and the rules, but unless you've lived it out yourself, you really don't know what it's truly like. So I think it's awesome that you bring that to the table, that, even when you're speaking to people and educating them, that you've, experienced all these different methods at different times of your life. And guess it goes to show you that, like, our bodies are ever changing too. As women, we're so dynamic, and this goes into the feminine genius of women, that we're not the same at 18 as we will be at 25, as we will be at 35, we will be at 45. So, it makes sense that what may work for you at 19, 20, 21 may not be what works for you in your 30s. And to know that it's okay. Sometimes I think, some of my patients or couples that I'm working with, they almost feel guilty about switching. There's a little bit of a kind of like, well, I feel bad that I switched from one. And I'm always like, no, what works for you is what's most important. What you put into charting and fertility awareness-based methods is what you get out of it. Mm-hmm. And so it ultimately comes down to what is best for the individual person, what is best for the couple, and they need to make those decisions on their own. What you're doing and what we do as, educators and providing this information is giving them all the tools, all the empowering information that's there, and let them, kind of receive that and make the next step.
So true. And so awesome. Really just to have the options, I think, within my own story, that was so helpful for me to know that I could switch. And I think because I was entering into this space of working in women's health and transitioning when I did my master's, really trying to focus in women's health, I realized this was a space I wanted to be in, so that I think it put me a couple steps ahead as far as that learning curve goes when you're learning about fertility awareness and women's health. But it's something that I think if I hadn't been in the weeds of building a website, I don't know that I would have known that. I think especially right now, there seems to be a proliferation of a lot of individuals coming forward and creating podcasts and in talking about fertility awareness-based methods and talking about what fertility awareness means for women, which is so good, especially in these online spaces. And it's not just one or two people occasionally talking about it, or it's only specific to providers, that I think we're able to touch women in different places and different times of their life, which is so beautiful and so important, because otherwise it's like, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, if I would have had this information. I mean, my mom was a huge, advocate for charting, and my parents used Creighton. So I fortunately had her. And I mean, she was really my inspiration for creating this site and really appreciating my cycle and not being totally grossed out by it, because the language she used in raising me and my sister was, that your body is really good and your fertility is really good. And this is a gift and it's good to understand it, but taking away those different pieces, it's like, I don't know, even with having a supportive mom and raising me in that way, if I didn't have other people talking about it, I don't think I would have realized there were options. I don't know that I would have realized there were opportunities for me to switch around, because I think even knowing that I could switch, I struggled a little bit with that, like guilt, or like, oh, are we doing it wrong? Should we be switching? And it was like, wait, of course I can. It's totally fine. But I think it's made it more normal for women to think about that, because they're seeing others share their stories. And so that's my hope and intention in sharing mine and being very open about my own experiences, is that it helps give women permission to know that depending on your story and what you're going through, like, it's okay to change. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to struggle and to wrestle and to bring it to somebody. Don't just sit with it on your own, or say, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, because I think there are always going to be seasons where that's going to happen in our marriages and in our journey of using fertility awareness-based methods, where you're like, this seems crazy. What am I doing? And it's like, okay, if I'm having that thought, I need to talk to somebody. And most likely it's an instructor, or like finding somebody who's an influencer or a leader in this space to say, okay, I'm struggling. What do I do? How do I do this? Because we shouldn't be having women alone in this space. And especially in that transition point when you're saying, I need a different method, or I need to talk about this because it's not working, or I'm struggling.
Totally. That's the number one thing I figured out kind of later on in the game with my clients as a fertility care practitioner is, okay, so if you get so frustrated, you want to tear up your chart and throw it out the window, text me. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong. Don't feel like you're doing something bad. Just reach out and let's have a conversation, because we don't want you to feel that way. We don't want you to have a negative relationship with your chart. We don't want you to have a negative relationship with your fertility. We want you to have a good relationship. And there's just that learning curve. It takes about 3 months for a woman to chart. I'd say a rough estimation, but around 3 months to like learn the system, get really used to it. So if you all who are listening, if you just started charting and you're like mad and it's month 2, like, don't worry, just keep pushing to month 3, because you will get into the groove. And then you also may stay frustrated at month 3 because there is something legitimately going on with your cycle, which is something that should be looked at by a medical provider. But something, Bridget, that as you were talking, I was just wondering, how do you respond to women when you are sharing with them about fertility awareness and charting your cycle, and they say, oh yeah, I do that. I know when my period is. I keep track on an app. And you're like, oh gosh, like, what's that conversation look like with you and women when they think fertility awareness is really just knowing when their period is and they're keeping track on an app? How would you fill those gaps?
It's a hard one, because I really try to meet women where they're at and just learning more. It's asking, I think, some of the fundamental questions, like, okay, what app are you using? Like, why did you start charting? Why did you want to know when your period was starting? What was going on in that time frame? And then I think, from there, it's not usually just one conversation, because I even have these conversations with girlfriends where they're like, hey, I'm using this app, but then you've been talking a lot about instructors online, and I'm just curious, like, should I do that? Like, I'm not married, I'm not engaged. And I think that's that disconnect that happens. So I really try to bring it back to their own story. Like, why did you start? Why are you wanting this information? Are you wanting to take it to your doctor? Are you just wanting to figure out, that you can be more aware of when you're feeling hormonal or emotional so that you can plan your schedule around your period a little bit more? Like, can we go a little bit deeper? And that's oftentimes starting there really helps, because it's opening up a conversation for them to get thinking about why they're doing it more intentionally. And so then if I start talking about, eventually instruction and having someone to work with, there's a more of an openness, I think, that way, because it's recognizing, oh yeah, what am I doing long-term with this information? Like, what am I going to be using this for? Especially for women who are single and not family planning, and thinking about having a family quite yet. That's helpful, because then it's really getting them to think longer term, like, well, maybe this is about health monitoring. And if it's health monitoring, like, maybe I need to go beyond just when my period is, because maybe I experience brown bleeding. Maybe I find that, like, my cervical mucus is really weird and I never know what it is. And just trying to engage those conversations. I think there's always kind of that, no pun intended, but that sticking point with cervical mucus, like, oh, I have to check it. Like, what do you do? And just trying to break down those barriers that exist. Like, it's not where you're just, taking your hand and, like, playing with it. It's like, okay, well, you wipe when you're, before and after going to the bathroom, you're kind of looking at it, you're checking the texture. You don't have to touch it if you don't want to, like, just to try to help, I think, make it a little less, like, gross and big, because that seems to be what's in women's heads, is like, that is just kind of gross. And it's like, well, but it's yours. It's coming from your body. There's nothing gross about it. It's not someone else's. And so I think just creating more of those foundational conversations around what's icky, what's gross, why do you want to know? And that really helps start to bridge those gaps. And so then they feel comfortable just asking me questions, and we can have a dialogue. I mean, I learn a lot from women in this space too, just to learn their why and why they're interested in their bodies, which is just amazing, because I think for me, it shows, the gaps where, can I help fill it or recommend different individuals to them, or different organizations that, are working, I think, to share women's stories or to address issues of discomfort, and there are different programs coming out around peace with your period, things like that, where it might be like, hey, this would actually be really good for you. You're really struggling around, what you think about your period and really frustrated by it and think it's gross. Like, this mini challenge that's going on that someone is providing for like 5 days on period peace, like, this might be perfect for you. And just, figuring out those gaps too, like, are there things that I could provide through these conversations that maybe are missing, that would be helpful in the process of figuring out, like, beyond just looking at your period, what is fertility awareness? What is engaging with your whole cycle and your body, and making that bigger connection that your hormones and your reproductive health are connected to other parts of your body. It's a part of a whole, because so often it's just over here, and women are really struggling to reconnect and say, okay, this is integrated, because their doctor's not talking about it. Mainstream culture isn't necessarily talking about it, although we're seeing it more and more. And so I think that those pieces really play into the decision to initially want to say, okay, what is my period and what is happening and how can I learn more?
It's a great time to be in this space with, just so many women, I feel like, are more talking about it. So it makes it more comfortable when we all start talking about, we all got the same stuff, like, we're all producing this stuff called cervical mucus. Like, I remember being in a high school talk, and, I'm going through the cycle, and there's like 100 girls in front of me, juniors and seniors. And, we start talking about the word, that you're always like, how are they going to react when I start talking about mucus? And doing to get through it, I'm like, girls, how many of you out there actually have this stuff between your period, this mucusy stuff? Raise your hand. And, you could just see the hesitancy of all these girls, like, I don't want to raise my hand because I don't know if the girl next to me has this stuff, right? Because they've never heard this before. And all of a sudden you can see little hands start to pop up. And then I can see, turning heads towards each other. And I swear, in this one particular group, it was like 10 girls almost kind of collapsed towards each other. And like a sense of relief that they had all raised their hand, because again, we get to the point where we're 18, 19, and we don't even know what this stuff is.
Yeah.
And how silly is it that, we have to almost feel like, oh my gosh, does anybody else see that stuff? Because I don't know. We don't talk about it, but it's so great to be in a place now and, with social media that more and more people are talking about this. And it doesn't matter, like the truth is the truth. It speaks to everyone, so this is like real feminism. A girl that's, super into all sorts of feminist things. She wants to be empowered about her bodies, and then the girl that's, religious or pro-life and all that, she wants to be empowered to know her body. So it speaks truth to everybody. And frankly, because of the woman's health aspect of it, and that so many women are going to walk into a doctor's office complaining of something related to this vital sign of their health, which is their menstrual cycle not being right, they want to be empowered to know how to address that situation, and they want to do things that are natural. They don't want to put synthetic chemicals in their body. So they're going to be asking more and more questions. This is just such an exciting time right now to be in the world of fertility awareness. And, it's just so great that Jamie and I get to do this every day and speak to people like you, because we're all speaking the same passions. When I was on your website reading about you, Bridget, I'm like, oh my gosh, she sounds like me. Again, it's like we didn't come up with anything, new and unique. These are all the things that we totally get passionate about because we all have the same truths within us. And we just want to spread this out to the rest of the world, which is just awesome that we have a platform to do it on.
I love what you said, just the tie with this fitting with so many women, whether you're, identifying very closely with feminism or, a new wave of feminism or being a new feminist, like wherever that space is. I think in this time where feminism is really getting shaken up and looked at differently and at different angles to say, like, what is feminist theory and how does this work? And these conversations around our bodies and embracing our periods and embracing cervical mucus, it's starting to come into question, like, wait, shouldn't these fit together? Like, shouldn't I own and be proud of my body? In some ways, you see, artwork where it's like the period art and you're like, okay, maybe that's a little graphic or irreverent, but the that intention is there. Like, I want to own this as part of my body and not see it as dirty and not see it as gross. Or you have the vagina monologues in theater and you're thinking, okay, again, maybe missing the mark a little bit here, but the intention there of just wanting to see the body as good and to see it as beautiful. And I think we so desire as women to hear, like, my body is beautiful and it's good, because for so long we tell ourselves, we're nitpicking, it's gross, it's ugly, it's nasty, whatever it might be. And it goes beyond cellulite. It's looking at, your mucus, your period, everything. It's like, can I shut it down? Can I turn it off? I don't want to have to deal with this. And when we start to see these conversations around, no, your body's really good, your period is great, the fact that you can align your cycle with your work schedule is actually a really amazing tool. There's a freedom that comes through that, and that I think women are so drawn to, regardless of where you fall on a political spectrum or in a spectrum of isms. Like, this is something that speaks to every single woman, because we're all navigating something similar, if not the same, in having a period and having cervical mucus. And I just love your story of having these young women, like, they're nervous to talk about cervical mucus, but they're also like, wait, I have questions because this messes with my underwear at a certain amount of time. And like, what do I do with it? Is this normal? Should I just let it go? I think that's so much more common than we realize. I know my sister and her friends will ask, like, hey, is there an app we should use? Or like, how much like mucus is too much? Do you know? And it's like, I'm so glad you feel comfortable to ask that, but how much more we need from women to step up into these spaces if they have the desire to teach NFP, to lead, to influence, so that they can be a voice, so someone can reach out on social media or through a web form or after a talk and say, like, I have questions, can I ask you? And know that this is someone who actually gets what's going on. They have the education, they have the background, they have the passion, the knowledge, to say, like, here, this is truth. And I want to share this with you. Like, this is the truth of your body and it's good. And here's all the science and the information behind it that's actually super real. And it's coming, in at such a quick rate, I think, especially now, because we're seeing those demands to say what's really going on. And it's not just coming from, I think where it's, natural family planning, fertility awareness kind of lived in the granola country space, or has been deemed that. So people are like, that's like the really hippie thing. And it's not. And it's because you're seeing Elisa Vitti and Dr. Stacey Sims and Cosmo and Glamour and different articles, like, slowly picking up on these things, or at least talking about period positivity. It's like, this is a step in the right direction. And it's impacting so many more women to say, wait, what? this is a thing, like this is real. I could do this. I could learn my body and actually be empowered by it. And I could actually feel freedom through it. And I think that's just the beauty of this time, and having women ask these questions and actually have answers to them.
And just how relieving is it? Because, I think about, if I didn't know about natural systems, if I didn't know, I don't think I'd really love the thought of taking a pill every day, or getting an injection of a synthetic hormone. Just my own personality, I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't know any other thing. And that's what everybody does. And we don't, if we don't want any additional children, like what does one do? So I agree with you so much, Bridget. And you're making it possible that accessibility is there, because women aren't going to know if they don't hear about it. But when they hear about it, Teresa, like you were saying, we all hold this truth within us. We recognize truth when it is in front of our face, and it's hard to ignore and it's hard to forget. And so if, again, our listeners are here and really nodding their head and thinking, gosh, I really want to learn more about this, please do so. Bridget, we're gonna wrap up with a question, but I also want you to share quick before I forget to ask, how can people find you and how can people learn more about this?
Yes, so I'm at www.managingyourfertility.com. That's the website, and that's actually going to be getting a revamped spring 2021, which is really exciting, just to offer more for women to have available to them. I'm also on social media. I'm predominantly on Instagram at Managing Your Fertility, and then I'm launching an email list this spring. I know this will be coming out in the summer, so it's already here. You should sign up. And then working on launching courses for the fall, specifically looking at college-aged women and 20-somethings who are single and looking to learn more about their cycle, and just doing it in a more integrative, holistic approach, looking at mindset, how we think about the body. Yes, talking, of course, about the methods and the practicals, and really helping women to transition into actually charting their cycle and feeling like they have their questions answered, so that they're ready to take that next step to say, okay, I'm ready to work with a practitioner and instructor. This is the next step for me. So those are just some different ways that I'm working with women. And then with the podcast, it's the Managing Your Fertility podcast, but you can just search on your podcast platform, Managing Your Fertility, and it'll come up.
Awesome. And when's that launched? Is it already launched?
It just launched a couple weeks ago, so it's very fresh. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. That's such an amazing resource, Bridget. Because Teresa, how many times do we get like inquiries? What are systems? How do I find them? How do I find somebody who helps? So this is great. Again, like that one website with all the options. I love it so much. Yeah. Okay. To wrap up, Bridget, what do you wish every young woman knew about her hormone genius?
The one thing that I want women to know and to lean into is that her body is good. So your body is good and you're capable of charting. Because so often I think the overwhelm of thinking that you can't do it, or you need to have a degree in biology or physiology for it to make sense, is a lie from, just from various points in our life that we've picked up on, or that we think about, that we think, oh, I can't do this. Like, this is something only a doctor should know about, or I'm not supposed to know this. When really the empowering moment comes from when you understand your cycle. And like you guys were both talking about, it takes some time. So to work with an instructor, their job is to help you understand how your body's working, so you can ask questions. So if you're looking at it and thinking this makes no sense, you can text and reach out, or have a call, or schedule a meeting, and knowing that you can get to a point of understanding your body and being comfortable in your body. And I think the empowerment that comes through that, and the increase in understanding and accepting yourself, that self-acceptance and self-love, is something we need to talk more about in this space, because that's a very real part of charting. And to know that you can do it, and that it helps in bringing freedom around your body, and how you think about your body, how you love yourself, is so real, and it's so important. And so I really encourage women listening that they take that next step, be willing, be bold, and saying, okay, I'm going to learn more. If it's reaching out to you both and saying, okay, what do I do? How do I go next? Do it. Be bold in sending that email, or reaching out if you follow somebody on social media who's an instructor or an influencer in this space, and say, I want to start. What are my next steps? Because they will have answers for you. We do have answers for you, and a place to go.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for spending your time with us today. And I've been waiting for this interview. I've been really excited for it. So I'm glad it worked out for all of us. And to our listeners, again, be sure to check out managingyourfertility.com, and be sure to follow Bridget and share this with your friends. Thanks, everybody.